And I'm going to slow down a little bit now. Now, up until now, you've had to listen fast because I was talking fast. Now I'm going to try and slow down just a little bit because I want to start out with something funny this morning. And like I told you, I don't believe this has anything to Pastor Jim because I'm pretty sure, have it on good authority, that he's in Dallas on a godly mission. But there was a pastor who decided one Sunday that he really didn't want to go to church and preach that day. So he called his associate pastor and said, listen, I'm not feeling well today. Would you take over? I won't be in church today, so would you take over? Well, up to this point, he's okay, except the pastor's already told a lie, but he asked forgiveness in advance. I understand that. I've done that myself. So he got in his car, though, and he drove 100 miles to a golf course where no one would know him. And he decided to play around the golf. That's what he felt like doing that day. Well, he teed up on the first tee. Is anybody here golf fans? Anybody at all? A few people. So you understand it's a little white ball that you put down on the ground. I'm not good at this game, but you put it down on the ground on a little stick that sticks up, and everybody has to be quiet so you can take this club that's that big, which is quite a bit bigger than the little white ball, and hit it. Now, what's amazing to me about that is in baseball, there's a ball that's that big around that you have a bat about the same size that's coming at you about 100 miles an hour and everybody's screaming. And you still hit the ball, but that's a whole different story. On golf, you got to be quiet so that you can hit that little white ball. Anyway, he draws back and swings and he hits that ball. Well, it goes up in the air. And it goes up in the air. And then a gust of wind caught it. And it blew it. It was 440 yards. It blew it to the green, 440 yards. And it hit the green, and it trickled into the cup. A 440-yard hole-in-one. Now, remember, this pastor was skipping church to play golf. Well, up in heaven, Gabriel looks at God and said, God, you know that he told the lie to go play golf, and you know that he should be at church, and yet you allowed him to hit a 440-yard hole-in-one. What are you doing? God looks at Gabriel and says, who's he going to tell? That's right. Well, today I want to talk to you about this subject. I am blessed and highly favored. Amen. Have you heard that? Now, that's a greeting. Sometimes you'll ask somebody, how are you doing today? And they will respond to you, I am blessed and highly favored. Well, I want to tell you today that I am blessed and highly favored. But I want to tell you something else. You are blessed and highly favored. Did you know that? You are blessed and highly favored. How do we know that, by the way? God told me? He did tell me. But I want to show you how he told me. This is kind of interesting. I found it interesting to me at any rate, because I knew already that I was blessed and highly favored. But how did that come about? Well, I'm going to go to the Christmas story. We're coming up on Christmas, and this has nothing to do with Jesus' birth as a whole of a Christmas story. But I want to go to the Christmas story in a part of it in Luke, the first chapter, 2 verses 26, or 3, 26, 27, 28. And it says it like this. Now, in the 6th month, the angel Gabriel was sent by God to a city of Galilee named Nazareth, to a virgin betrothed to a man whose name was Joseph, of the house of David. The virgin's name was Mary, and having come in, the angel said to her, rejoice, highly favored one, the Lord is with you. Blessed are you among women. Now, can we agree this morning that Mary was blessed and highly favored? The angel told her so. What was about to happen to Mary? She was about to be indwelled by God himself. by Jesus Christ. She was going, you already know where I'm going with this, don't you? She was about to be indwelled bodily by the Son of God. She was blessed and highly favored enough to be indwelled by God Himself. Why are we blessed and highly favored? Why are we? Here is why. 1 Corinthians 3:16. Do you not know that you are the temple of God and that the Spirit of God dwells in you? I am blessed and highly favored because God dwells in me. Mary was blessed and highly favored because God dwelled in her. We get the same treatment as Mary. Now, what I would like for you to come away with today is not just that we are blessed and highly favored, but how we can know and how we can remind ourselves. And why is that important? I'll tell you why it is for me. Sometimes I forget. Have you ever done that? Sometimes I forget that I am blessed and highly favored. Sometimes the things of life make me not feel so blessed. Has anybody ever had that feeling? The things of life, sometimes I just don't feel blessed. So, I came up with this thought. Now, it wasn't today. I've had this thought for many, many years now. But it kind of culminated in how to explain it this morning. How can I be reminded? Believe it or not, and I know you do believe it, the Bible gives us a way to remember that we are blessed and highly favored. It gives us a way to be reminded. And I'm going to show you this morning, that's what my attempt is at any rate, I'll show you this morning something that you can do in case you don't already do it. Those times when you might forget, those times when you might not feel blessed. And sometimes around these holiday seasons, those kinds of things happen because life happens around the holiday season. And sometimes the life that happens around the holiday season is not always joyful. And we have a tendency to get a little down sometimes. Some of us do. Sometimes some people get really elated during the holidays. So there's all kinds of emotion. But whether you get elated or whether you have a time of struggling with being blessed and highly favored, there is a way that you can be reminded that you are blessed and highly favored. And let's start by talking about a little bit about what the children of Israel did. Now, there's examples throughout the Bible, and I only picked a couple of them because we don't have that much time to go through all those, and you can look them up for yourself, and most of them you do already know anyway. But in Deuteronomy 6:12, it says, "Then take care lest you forget the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery." What God was telling the children of Israel at that point in time was, you need to do something that will allow you to remember that you were blessed and highly favored. You need to do something that would allow you, when you get down, when you don't feel blessed, whenever the enemy is charging after you, you need to get something, you need to do something that will allow you to be reminded that I am with you. And what is that something that he told them to do? He told them to build monuments. Basically, over in Genesis, the 35th chapter, and the 14th verse, and we'll just go through a couple of these. But so Jacob set up a pillar in the place where he talked with him, and a pillar of stone, and he poured a drink offering on it, and he poured oil on it. If you'll go throughout the Old Testament, you will find where they built monuments to events that happened, so that every time they passed that monument, they were reminded of that event. It was always an event where God was with them, where God did something for them, where God poured out his blessings on them, where God allowed them to be a part of his plan that they didn't know they would be. And they built a monument by that. And here Jacob did that. He built a monument of stone, and it would remind him, every time he saw that monument of stone, he built a monument of stone to remind him of what had happened in that place. Now, Jacob actually wrestled with God. And most of you know that story, I'm sure. But Jacob wrestled with God, and it caused him to have a limp the rest of his life. You know, I don't know. Maybe the moral of that story is don't wrestle with God. You might wind up lame. But Jacob did, and he wound up with a limp. But he was blessed because he would not let the angel go until he was blessed. And when daylight came, the angel had to go, so he wound up having to bless Jacob, and he did, and he called his name Israel, and that's how that whole thing happened. But that's a great story. I'm sure you know that story, but if you don't, go back and read it. And in the book of Genesis, but Jacob built a monument, something to remind him, something he could look at, something he could physically see, or he would physically know that this happened in this place. And every time I see this, I will be reminded that I am blessed. Every time I see this, I will be reminded that I am highly favored. I am blessed and highly favored. You are blessed and highly favored. By now you know that I'm going to talk about my monuments. But let's go to Joshua. Fast forward now. The children of Israel now have been in slavery, and they're out, and they've gone through the desert. Now they've gone into the land of Canaan. And as they cross the Jordan River into the land of Canaan, the waters parted for the second time. It's not one we talk about very much, but we talk about the Red Sea where the waters parted, and children of Israel left Egypt and went off into the wilderness. But there was another time where the waters parted, and that was at the River Jordan when they went from the wilderness into the land of Canaan. Well, this is that time. And what Joshua did is he had the 12 tribes, a representative from the 12 tribes of Israel, pick up a stone from the riverbed and take it to the other side. And there they piled up those 12 stones as a monument to remind them that God had delivered them through the wilderness. They had been there for 40 years by now. But God had delivered them through the wilderness into what is called in the Bible the land of milk and honey, which basically is a land of plenty. Now, there was an enemy there, but they eventually, they had to conquer the enemy. They eventually, of course, would do that. Which is an interesting story about Caleb when he was 80 years old. Caleb was a warrior, and when he was 80 years old, he didn't have any more battles to fight, so he told God, I don't want to give it up yet. I want another mountain. Give me another mountain to conquer. And God did that. That's another story, by the way, but they built a monument to allow them to be reminded every time they saw that monument that they had been delivered, that they were blessed, and they were highly favored. Now, here's one that I'm going to throw at you that I don't know if you've thought of before. Do you know that even God built a monument? Even God built a monument. Well, you think, well, God doesn't need to be reminded of anything. No, but we do. So God built a monument so that we would know and be reminded that we are blessed and highly favored. What is that monument? Well, I'm glad you asked. Over in 2 Corinthians, the 3rd chapter and the 3rd verse, Paul said it this way. Clearly, you are an epistle of Christ, ministered by us, written not with ink, but by the Spirit of the living God, not on tablets of stone, but on tablets of flesh, that is, of the heart. God built a monument inside of me. Now, isn't that pretty cool? God built a monument inside of you. I think that's pretty good. So that I would know and I would be reminded from God himself that I am blessed and highly favored. That God has got me on his mind and that I am someone that he cherishes. That I am someone that he wants to bless. That I am someone whom he has blessed. Are we the only ones that build monuments? No, of course not. The world, by the way, everywhere we look, there are monuments to remind us of something. Everywhere we look. I'll just give you a couple of those. The world's monuments are not quite the same as God's monuments. Now, we have all kinds of conversations, and we do all sorts of things, and we have goals, and we decide to go in directions, and then we have conversations about it, and a lot of times those conversations go like this: well, we've come a long way, but we've got a ways to go. And somebody else will respond, well, we've only started, and we've got a long way to go. And that's kind of sort of the way some of the monuments go with those discussions. Another one of the world's monuments that you can relate to, I think, is this is what we call a world championship boxing belt. I don't know, I'm not a boxing fan. I think it's silly for people to beat one another, but they do that. That's just my own opinion. If you're a boxing fan, more power to you. You know, I'm not going to beat you up, though, because I'm not going to do that. But anyway, they have this monument. It's a belt, and you see them, they hold it up, and it's, look what I have accomplished. Look at this. I am the champion of the world. And you can tell because this is the way I look. This is what it looks like, by the way, to be a champion. Turn that slide there, Ellis. Really? That's a winner right there. Anyway, so the world, everywhere we look, has monuments to remind us of something. Billboards, that's a monument to remind us of something. Commercials are a monument to remind us of something. Everywhere we look. A church steeple is a monument to remind us of something. And we all have different values that we place on the things that remind us of these things. But regardless of what the values are that we place on these things that remind us, they do remind us of something. And so what I want to be reminded of when I forget or when I don't feel blessed, I want to be reminded that I am blessed and highly favored. Because, I don't know if any of you do this, but sometimes I forget. Now, you might say, why are you saying that twice? Because repetition is how we remember. That's one of the ways we remember. Sometimes I forget. Sometimes I just don't feel blessed. And I need to know how I can be reminded. Well, my first monument that I want to discuss on finding out or being reminded that I'm blessed is highly favored is when God blessed me to be born. How many of you have that monument? Well, some of you are not born yet because you didn't raise your hand. All right, I'm going to give you another opportunity, but not with this question, with another one that's more important. Well, my monument for being blessed is December the 3rd, 1946. Yes, that's next Saturday. We're having an open house at my house in Gonzales. You're all welcome to come. You don't have to bring a gift. Just come and eat something with us. Next Saturday, December the 3rd. That's my monument. Every December the 3rd, or whenever I think of December the 3rd, guess what? I remember that I am blessed and highly favored. Because without this monument, there would be no this anything. It would just be nothing because I wouldn't be here. You have the same monument. I would advise, I would encourage, at least encourage you to remember that date. Oh, I don't have to remember. I don't have to encourage you to do that, do I? You remember that one. That's an easy one to remember. Well, here's one. When God accepted my decision to be his monument. How about that? How many have that monument? If you don't raise your hand on this one, I want to talk to you after church. Because we have some things to discuss. We have some very important stuff to discuss. Because when I became God's monument is when I accepted his Spirit, the life of Jesus, as my personal Lord and Savior. And he indwelled in me, and that was his monument to me to remind me that I am blessed and highly favored. My date, by the way, was April the 21st, 1974. Now, there are some that may remember your date, and there are some that may not remember your date. I don't know if that's important. It's only important if you decide it's important. But the important part of this monument, I believe, is to know that you accepted God's invitation to accept him. And that in that acceptance, you became his monument to you, to remind you that you're blessed and highly favored. That's mine. That's two. That's two monuments. The ones I'm going to give you, most of them you're going to have. There are other monuments that you will have throughout your life that will remind you that you are blessed and highly favored. It's important going into this season of Thanksgiving and Christmas, and then after that, Easter comes rather quickly. It's important going into this season that we be reminded that just like Mary, who was blessed and highly favored because of the indwelling of God in her physically, we are blessed and highly favored because of the indwelling of God in us spiritually. My next monument, when God blessed me with my children. That's a nice monument. I like that one. How many have that one? And I almost guarantee you the ones who have that monument know the date, and the women probably know a whole lot more than the men. Because they experienced something that the men never experienced, and it wasn't a headache. My children, the date that reminds me that I'm blessed and highly favored with my children are April the 24th, 1971, and January the 3rd, 1989. I am blessed and highly favored. Wouldn't swap those kids for nothing. They're both past teenagers. So I wouldn't swap them for nothing. Don't ask me about when they were teenagers. But at this point in time, I wouldn't swap them for anything because they are a blessing. Now, if you don't have any children yet, you've got that blessing to come. And there's a lot that goes with it, but all of it is a blessing. All of it. I have another monument as well. And that is when God blessed me with a beautiful, godly spouse. Everyone doesn't have this blessing, but some do. God blessed me with a beautiful, godly spouse. And I have a date to remember that by. And it reminds me every time I think of this date, and I use this date a lot. Every time I think of and use this date, it reminds me that I am blessed. I can almost never get down, by the way, because I have so many monuments that allow me to know that and remind me that I am blessed and highly favored. I almost can never get down. I mean, sometimes life will come at me at 100 miles an hour, and it seems like, you know, I'd love to get my problem, take care of my problems one by one, but they won't get in line. And it's just, but then I think of one of these monuments, and it reminds me Well, my monument for this one is July the 11th, 1999. What a beautiful day that was. And I think about it, and I don't have to just think about the date. I look at the beautiful, godly wife that I have. And I know that I am blessed and highly favored because I know me better than you know me. And the fact that God gave me a beautiful, godly spouse, when I know me and I know that I don't deserve that, I know that God, in his monument to me, blessed me with her. Sink in. All right. My next monument. When God revived my relationship with my parents. Now, all of you don't have this, but you've got something in your life that can wind up being a monument. So I'll tell you about this one simply because it's relevant in my life. Now, a lot of you have heard this story. When I was a younger man, I wasn't the ideal. I was a preacher's kid. Let me put it that way. And everything that you ever heard about preacher's kids is true, in my life at any rate. And as I got older, my parents and I didn't see eye to eye. And eventually, after I got saved, I questioned so much that I wound up getting excommunicated from my own dad's church. He was a preacher, of course, as I said, and I wound up getting kicked out of that. And they were not allowed to speak with me or to have anything to do with me. Nobody in the church was allowed to do that. Don't feel bad for that, by the way. That is one of the reasons that I am here today. That's another blessing, by the way, and I'm going to tell you how that happened in a minute. But one of the things that my dad told me at one point when all of this was going on, he was serious with this, and he was honest in what he said, and it hurt him very much to say it. But he said, "Listen, Benny, I can no longer pray for you because there is no hope for you, because you are going to die and go to hell because of what you've done." And basically what I had done is I had questioned the church and the things that they did and the things that they believed and the things that I grew up believing. And so my response to him was, "Well, Dad, I don't know of anyone in my life that thinks enough about me to tell me that." And that's the way we left that meeting. A few years later, this had gone, I kept coming around. One of the things that confused my parents was even though I had been kicked out, I kept coming back and visiting them. I kept loving them. I kept talking to them. And that was very confusing because that never actually happened in the past. In the past, whenever somebody got kicked out of church, they just got kicked out and they left and you never saw them again. I didn't do that. I just kept coming around. And because I love my parents, I honor my parents, and you've heard me do that, and I still do that to this day. They did what they did honestly. It wasn't that they were trying to be mean. They had been taught this, and they did it honestly. And at this point in time in my life, I understood that. A number of years later, in fact, the date was April the 22nd. 2001. That's a Sunday, by the way. I went to visit my dad's church. And keep in mind what I just told you. My dad asked me that day to teach a Sunday school class. He was not allowed to do that. He paid the price for it later on, because somebody turned him in. But that's all right. He asked me to teach a Sunday school class. That was the day that God allowed me to be reconciled with my parents. That is a monument, by the way. That's an awesome monument. I know that God sees me and that I am blessed and highly favored. Now, you have a monument somewhere in your life, most likely, that is that important to you. It doesn't have to be that particular one that I've said, but it's one that you have. That if you will make sure that you have that somewhere where you can see it, where you can pass by it, just like in the Old Testament where they passed by these monuments of stone. If you have that somewhere, it doesn't matter where it is. I mean, it could be a note that's pinned up on a refrigerator. It could be something that's just in your mind. It could be a note that's on your phone nowadays. It could be anything, anywhere. But if you have that monument written down somewhere, every time you see it, every time you think about it, you can be reminded, just as I am reminded, that you are blessed and highly favored. Have the monuments. You have them. Make sure that you have them where you walk by them sometimes. Because if you don't walk by them and you're not reminded, guess what happens? You get down and you forget that you're blessed. And you don't feel like you're blessed sometimes. But you are. I'm here to tell you today that you are. Is there anything wrong with getting down and not feeling like you're blessed? No. What's wrong is if you stay there. Because if you stay there, it'll ruin your attitude. It'll ruin your life. You can allow it to ruin your life if you're not careful. So what I want to encourage you to do is to put these monuments somewhere where you walk by them sometimes. You figure out where that is. Put them somewhere where you walk by them sometimes. Another monument that I have. When God supplied my needs and I didn't see a way. Now, that has happened so many times that I cannot tell you how many times. I'm only going to tell you about one time, and you'll understand it. Hurricane Katrina happened on August the 29th of 2005. When Hurricane Katrina happened, everything got flooded, you know that, got blown away. I didn't have a job then for a while, for a good long while. And we got behind on our house payment, 3 months behind, by the way, with no job and no prospects and no way to know that God was going to take care of that situation. Pastor Jim and myself and a couple other people got together, and we, for lack of a better word, formed a company. Lori was involved in a lot of that. We never actually did any work. We were the best standby company that you've ever seen. I'm serious as I can be. We never actually did any work, but we stood by, ready to do the work. It just never came our way. But the beautiful part of it is, we got paid eventually. It took 3 months. But we got paid whether we did the work or not. And after 3 months, I was 3 months behind, and Brenda can tell you this story as well from her perspective, but we were 3 months behind on our house payment. We had talked to the mortgage company, and they said they understood. At least they didn't repossess, let's put it that way. And when we did get paid from the work that we never did, it had to be from God, you understand? When we did get paid, I got paid enough to catch up all 3 months and get a month ahead in the house payment. Well, I see that as a monument. That date, by the way, that we got paid, put that up. My computer died, so put that up. It was December the 9th, 2005. If you'll notice that it was from August the 25th to December the 9th, 2005, where we got really behind. So December 5, coming up pretty soon, 2005, was the day that God put a monument in front of me to remind me that I am blessed and highly favored. That's the day God did it. So, there's another monument, though, coming. When God allowed my mom and dad, or my dad and mom in this slide, to live 92 and 94 years respectively. That was an awesome monument in my life as well. We all have that. Some of us are still building that monument. I'm building that monument for my children. They will remember it someday, but I remember it like it was yesterday. Not sadly either. I remember it with joy and thanksgiving because my mom and dad raised me in a Christian home in what we call the fear and admonition of the Lord. Those big words. I heard that so much when I was growing up. In the fear and admonition of the Lord. You know, he really believed the scripture said, suffer your child to come unto me. Suffer the children. And the suffer part was the part that he keyed in on. But that's a whole nother story, you understand. But my parents lived 92 and 94 years. And I have a monument to remind me that I am highly favored. I am blessed. And those dates are, go ahead and put them up. April the 4th, 2004, and June the 23rd, 2006. Now, there's a date, if you went back and you said, okay, there's a July the 23rd, 1911, and August the 18th, 1911. Those are monumental dates as well, by the way. But in between that date that I just said, you know, for my dad, it was July the 23rd, 1911. There's a dash. And then the next one, of course, is April 4th, 2004. Well, that dash, that's the monument. Now, there's a date on each end, yes, but the dash is the monument. Because it is the dash in which they taught me. It's the dash in which I came to be. It is the dash in which I have the monument. So I know I have the date on each end, and those are part of the monument to me. But it is that dash in the middle. That dash is the most important part of that monument. We, by the way, are in the middle or somewhere in our dash, building a monument for those who come after us. We are blessed and highly favored. And this monument will allow other people in the future to realize and to be reminded that we are blessed and highly favored. I think that's pretty cool. I like that. I like the dash. I really do. I wrote a song about it one time, a long time ago. We won't do it today. All right, so now I have all these monuments. That's not all of them, but that's enough for you to get the idea and enough for us to not run out of time before the kids come in. So what does that mean? Does that mean that I'll always do the right thing? Does that mean that I'll always say the right words? Does that mean that I'll always think godly thoughts? Or does it mean I'll always live a sinless life? Well, probably not. I might try. Why is that the case? Why is that the case? I'll try. Well, that's the case, but sometimes I forget. Sometimes I don't feel blessed. But sometimes I need to be reminded. Guess what? Guess what? When I need to be reminded, that's what my monuments are for. If I could encourage you to do anything this morning at all, I would encourage you to build your monuments, to know and to be reminded when you forget, and when you don't feel blessed, to build those monuments so that you can pass by them in that moment when you need it, and be reminded that you are blessed and highly favored. You are. You are. We're not talking about your neighbor. We're not talking about anybody else. We're talking about you. Now, whenever I point my finger at you, I got three pointing back at me. I know I am blessed and highly favored, and I'm reminded of it all the time. Everywhere I go, because everywhere I go, I'll walk past some reminder. And it can be as simple as a date. It can be as wonderful as just passing by my beautiful, godly spouse in the hall. You know, even if we have to squeeze past one another now, where we didn't have to in the past. I'm talking about me, y'all. I'm not talking about you. I'm reminded that there was a time when I was skinny. Now, I'm reminded that I am blessed and highly favored. I want you to laugh about it because I want you to remember it. And very often, being able to see something in a comical light will allow us to remember things that we may have difficulty remembering in the future. But whatever you do, build some monuments if you don't have them already. If you have them already, highlight those boogers. But if you don't have them, build some monuments. But don't just build them. Build them somewhere where you're going to pass by them just when you need them the most, to remind you that you, just like Mary, are blessed and highly favored. And this is what reminds you to think that way. And if you go over to Philippians 4:18, you'll find the way you're supposed to think. You can go over there and read it. There's no way that we can think that way, though, if we are not thinking that we are blessed and highly favored. Because we'll get off into the mullygrubs. I don't know what that means. I just heard it all my life, and it sounds like it's not good. You get off into the mullygrubs, and you get to thinking like the song on the hee-haw used to be, oh, gloom, despair, and agony on me. And the first thing you know, you're not remembering that you're blessed and highly favored. But you are. This holiday season, know that you are blessed. This holiday season, know that you are highly favored. This holiday season, know that God loves you so much that He was willing to have His Son come into this world and share this experience all the way from the beginning date to the end date with a dash in between. And that we celebrate His dash by remembering that we are on His mind during that dash. And that we currently stay on His mind because after that dash, His line goes on forever. Guess what? Ours does too. See, here we only have a date and a date with a dash in between, but after that last date, the line goes forever. You might say, how can that be? Because forever is it's easy. Figure it out this way. The dash then becomes a circle. No beginning and no end. forever. It's a circle. You ever considered why the earth is a circle? Have you ever considered why virtually everything that you see that is alive is a circle? Has no beginning and has no end. That's our dash after that last date happens. We got the children that's going to be coming in a minute. Today, by the way, is Communion Day. And the children are going to come in, I'm told, at right about now. And so I was given instructions to wind up by now. But to get there, you have 2 more minutes? All right, let me tell another joke then. No, no, I'm joking. Just with that joke. Yes, ma'am.
Can I just say something?
You may.
On our prayer website, we have over 1,000 monuments from 2013 to 2016 of praises that we have received answered prayers from God. And they're dated. And there's over 1,000 on our prayer website. It says a church,
You know,
we have monuments.
that would be an awesome adventure. That would be an awesome, mycrossroads.com, and if you go into the resource tab at the top of the page, click on that, it'll have a drop down, and the prayer, it's called prayer what? Prayer requests, I think is as simple as that. But anyway, if you go in there, you can take a look at some of those monuments. Some of them are going to be your monuments, by the way.
Exactly.
Go grab a hold of one of those and write it down on a piece of paper or print it out from the website and tap that baby on your bathroom mirror or wherever it is that you need to put it. Anyway, that would be awesome to be able to do that. And even if it's not one of yours, you can go to that website and look at some of those 1,000 or all of those 1,000, and in doing so, you can be encouraged that God is still on the throne, that he still hears and answers prayers, and that we are still blessed and highly favored.